Hey guys, this is Calm, and I'm going to do the 10th game in the World Rapid Championship 2013. This is between Mamedyarov and Vladimir Akopian. Mamedyarov is white. So he opens with d4 here, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, which is the most common. You can also play knight f3 to get into kind of Bogo Indian lines instead of Nimzo Indian, which is the immediate bishop b4 after knight c3. This is what I play as well. Okay, and so f3 is played here, so this kind of indicates the same-ish variation. And generally the idea of this with white is to take a big center. F3 supports e4, which is important in relation to the Nimzo Indian defense because it puts a lot of pressure on the c4 square, but it does it via its pieces. It does it by pinning this knight against our king, and due to this pin being able to have this knight control e4, if we played immediately e4 we could have just taken it because of that pin. So f3 kind of tries to work against that. I tried this for a very small time period when I was much younger, just messing around. And I really liked the positions it gave me visually, but as I got better, I tended to find more holes in it. Generally, black plays against it via d5 or c5, either of which is fine. And basically, whichever you're playing against, if it's against d5, then it's still hard to push through the c4. Generally, you have to play e3, bishop d3, and then e4, which is very slow. This knight can get in the way. It generally has to go to h3. And then castles before you can actually get that break in. Or if they play via c5, you tend to push d5, and then you get the position where, yes, you've got even more of the centre, but you have big dark squared holes along here. This bishop can just drop back to c5 if it wants. Then it's got this whole diagonal, and it's quite hard to oppose it with this bishop, given you need to position your queen so that you can then play bishop e3 or and so on. And even then, in those lines, generally black can use the queen to support it and keep control over that diagonal, which is pretty annoying. So anyway, we'll see what happened. d5 is played, a3, and just trading on c3. This is obviously the most normal. It messes up the pawn structure. It's kind of the compensation black gets for giving up the two bishops so early. And also white has to spend time on playing this a3 move. So yeah, and then c5 is played quickly thereafter. Although it looks like this is just giving a pawn at the start, this is immediately addressed via queen a5, which would fork both c5 and c3. Both couldn't be defended. Unless you play something like queen d4, but then knight c6 pushes it away, so you'd still end up losing that pawn. I mean, you could go to queen e3 if you're being really pedantic, but you know, then d4, and the queen's hit, and you can't take because of the knight on c6, and once you move the queen you can then take on c3, regaining your material, or on c5 again, regaining your material. So c takes d5 is played. You can not do this as well. I think there's other moves, but I imagine we're actually following some theory, so I'm actually going to bring up the Chess Live database, and yeah, you can see that, hopefully you can see this, well, we don't want that one, in case we spoil the result. Almost 3,000 games played in this line. So let's just follow along with the theory for a bit. I don't think we need to talk too much about it when it's all will have been played instantly on the board because it's some known thing. So knight takes. The reason for knight takes is we put pressure on this c3 pawn, which in combination with queen a5, which will later come, along with knight c6, there's going to be a lot of pressure on this diagonal. And by playing f3, white's delayed himself castling a lot, because he can't do his natural development with, say, knight f3, which has control over d4, and he can't develop this bishop because his pawn's still in the way. So white is taking with a piece essentially to gain more time on white's position, gets pieces closer into the attack. E takes would otherwise be more natural because we open up this bishop, but in this situation it's generally thought of as better for black to go straight after the kind of weakness in the speed of development that white has. So d takes c5 is played, and to me this is a move which looks weird, but as we can see it's the most commonly played. And I think the idea is just that if we don't take, we're going to be taken, and it's going to be awkward to, you know, play on like that. So we play something else like, I don't even know what we could play, but let's say for the sake of example, queen d3, protecting this pawn. White has the option of queen a5 immediately putting pressure here, then after say queen d2, knight c6. Black's just getting up a lot of pressure quickly, and all our moves are kind of blocking up our position more. We'll have the queen on d3, which blocks our bishop. We'll have the bishop on d2, protecting against this pawn, which again cramps our king. And black will be pretty free-flowing in its development. So the idea here is actually kind of like to gain space. And basically we know we're going to lose the c5 or c3 pawn, but maybe the idea is that we can take on c5, and with the combination of say e4 later on, we can play bishop e3 after say knight takes c3 and a queen move, to try and hold on to the c5 pawn, which could, you know, hold on to that material there. So d takes c5 is played, queen a5 as I said, again forking these two pawns. e4 is played immediately. So e4 is kind of tricky because it looks like black can win this rook. You take on c3 of check, and then you pick up this rook. But of course we'd respond to queen takes c3 with bishop d2. Then the queen's hit by the bishop, and this rook is protected via the queen. So the queen has to move, and then we're able to take this knight. So as it is, it's actually the knight that has to take on c3, and when we do that we get ourselves in trouble via queen d2, maybe? Probably queen d2 rather than bishop d2, because the knight is pinned to the queen. When the play, or maybe not queen d2 actually. Maybe it is bishop d2. Yeah, well, bishop d2, and you can take here, take here. It's unclear. Let's look at it, because I don't like to be confused in things. So let's see, if we take here, we'll see what Houdini says. Yes, the idea is queen d2. And then what was I thinking? If, for example, we took here, then we'd have bishop b2, okay. And once the knight moves, it wants to take e4, but let's say the knight went there, for example, we just have the problem that, okay, rook c1, first of all, and then this falls. So it's actually a pin along the c-file that kind of justifies that. And if we don't take on c5, then we can't protect this knight. So it's kind of tricky, actually. Something that's not immediately obvious. Anyway, let's see how theory says it should go. Knight e7 was played. Let's see if this is still theory. Yeah, it's still over 600 games. We'll just click through it a bit. Bishop e3 is what everyone plays. If you take on c3 now, then the idea will be king f2 to support the bishop, get our king to safety more. Again, this rook c1 can come in some lines. You'd want to protect a3 first somehow though. But king f2 is kind of a common idea just to save time on castling. and it's safe enough to protect c3. It leaves the e2 square open for either a knight or a bishop. It's fine. Castle's played. Queen b3, queen c7. Now there's a bit of divide between a4, knight h3 and bishop b5. These bottom two are normal developing moves. This a4 move is a bit trickier to understand for me. I guess the idea is we can play queen a3 at some point to help protect c5 after knight d7, for example. But we'll just, they're all reasonable options, and we'll just see how it went in the game. So it's knight h3, just developing. Knight d7 played. Knight f2, because the knight doesn't really have a better square to go to than d3. So what we're doing here is we're giving up the c5 pawn, and given we only have 22 games left here, I'm actually gonna just take that and then get rid of this. Okay, so we're back to a full-size board, and there's only 20 games played. Maybe they still know the theory, probably they do at their level, but we're just going to try and go from here and work out the common ideas. So from here the obvious move is queen c4, and that's not just because I saw it down there before we closed the thing, it's because it pins this knight to the queen. And if this knight were to move, for example, to a6 to support this queen, he's moving his knight further out of play. There's no real good square for his knight to go on compared to c5. Obviously on c5 it's better than a6 because it controls more squares. And so that would just be a backward move, kind of, from black. So the other options from that are basically b6 and b6 only. And on b6, after queen c4, b6, I think I'd actually be very tempted to take on c5 with the bishop, because then what we're doing is we're mirroring the pawn structure. Because I would be a little worried about my pawn structure as white right now, especially given I'm not castled, because these are connected, and these are connected, so that's 2 pawn islands compared to 1, 2, 3. And having this on a semi-open c-file, he's going to be able to get his rooks along this file quickly. So even though we're giving up the 2 bishops, I feel like it would be a worthwhile trade at that time to just kind of even out the game. I'm not sure that the opening... Well, I guess since they're still in theory, this is how white planned it to go. But, yeah, we'll see. So queen c4 was played, b6 was played, good. And bishop takes c5 was played. And then b takes. Black has the option of taking the queen as well. Then white would pretty much always trade queens, I would have thought. Just again, because he wants this pawn structure similarity. So yeah, it's basically up to black whether he wants to keep the queens on or not. I might be tempted to keep them on, because the queen is relatively awkwardly placed relative to white's bishop, because white's bishop is blocked by his queen. So that slows down development. I feel like this queen can be useful on c7 to support d8 and b8, so I'd take with the b pawn, which was played. Okay, so knight d3 is played, attacking c5. So okay, so I missed that we'd actually be losing this pawn here, but I don't think it's a big deal, because we can just move this bishop. And after the captures, say after bishop d7, queen takes, knight takes. You know, bishop move anywhere, and then rook c8, we're going to win back this pawn. Probably the more simpler way to put it is actually if knight takes first, then we could just play knight d7. Well, basically, we can play rook c8 at some point, and it's going to pin along this file to win back c3, so it's not an issue, is what I'm saying. So bishop d7, queen takes c5, and rook a c8, yeah. So this is the way to do it, don't trade queens first. Traded, and as you can see this c3 pawn, although it's an advantage for white at the moment, his bishop is still hampered in development, and probably the best way to protect this is king d2, but then the doubling of the rooks, rook c1, and white is going to be very tied down to the defense of this pawn, to the point where I don't think it's a big advantage for white at all. I think it's very much almost even. King d2 is played, rook f8, rook c1, now knight c6. So the idea here is to put this knight on c4 probably, via a5, and if we do that we'll be able to pick up a3 potentially, but more importantly just blunt the position, prevent this pawn ever moving forwards, and that's gonna again tie up white. Relative to e7, this knight move is just more in the game after this, so it's kind of beneficial for multiple reasons. We'll also be looking at moves like bishop a4 to prevent this a pawn moving forwards and cutting off these squares around the king, or moves like bishop b5, just further strengthening the c4 square. So rook b1 is played now. So for me this is kind of interesting because he's just played rook c1 to defend this pawn, but now he's pretty much giving it up after, say, knight a5. Because he's not going to play rook c1 back again because it's just very passive. So basically he's looking to sack this pawn and get an active rook in compensation, which is not too big a deal because of course white is up that c3 pawn at the moment, and probably he feels that having the active rook in an equal material position gives him better winning chances than being up a pawn in a position where he's very passive, and he's very probably right with that. So knight a5 is played, knight e5 is played. So black can either give the bishop or play bishop e8 back, and then look to play f6. It depends basically if he wants to win or if he's okay with a draw. If he's okay with a draw, he'll probably play f6 immediately and just allow this trade down, and then the c3 weakness should, I mean, it's pretty, not simple for black to draw, but he should have enough in a rook endgame to have very good chances at it. Okay, and he does play f6. Takes, king c2, rook dz7, threatening this pawn, no way to save it. Well, okay, c4 is played, but again this doesn't save it, and this move from white is basically trading down the last minor pieces, so we're going to be left in a double rook endgame, where actually I'd slightly take black's position because he's already got connected rooks, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, so what white is doing here is he's actually maneuvered his king over to the a file, and his hopes for this game are going to revolve around trying to take a7 and promote this a pawn. With these two rooks though, I don't think it's going to work, and he actually has to be careful that he doesn't set himself up in some kind of mating net along the a and b files. So this makes sense, threatening this pawn. h5 is played, gives room to the king. Prevents moves like h4, h5, h6 from white, and pins down g3 in the future if h4 is played. So this is probably best from white, gets an active rook himself. Check is played, and a6 check is played. So this is clever because after takes, black can check, and then after king moves he can take off this a pawn, and then there'll be no real chance for white to win, because even though his king was in a position whereby it's much easier for him to protect the passer on the a file because his king is actually here as opposed to black's king, which is the other side of the board, he'll have traded off the a pawn, so it's kind of irrelevant. So white doesn't want to go for that because he realises that if he loses the a pawn he has no winning chances. and then black's just bringing up his rook like this. This forks a3 and f3. So it looks like he's giving up f3 in order to keep this pawn on and try and have the potential of promoting it. The problem with it is that he's giving e4 as well, so he's going to be giving black a lot of pawns here, and he's going to hope that just having this connected, well, not connected, but this backed up passer is going to, trade for a rook at some point later on. He's going to have enough to win based on the two rooks there. It would be, as long as black's pawns don't get to say, or get to this 5th rank and white has no pawns. So a4 is played, takes on e4, takes on a6, threatening the h2 pawn now. White doesn't care, he's just allowing all these pawns to be taken basically. g3 goes as well. Not sure how much time they have left at this point. It is of course a rapid championship, so could be very little. So okay, it's kind of an important moment right now. So basically black needs to stop that white pawn, and he needs to get his own pawns moving. But basically either way that I see it happening is either black's going to get his rooks to here and be able to perpetual check the white king, or white's going to be able to get both his rooks on the 2nd rank and check this black king enough. Maybe black can avoid that if he gets his king here, keeps this rook here, because it'll protect this pawn enough to whereby he can't get in those checks. So I think if anyone has a chance to win, it's actually black, based on the ability to stop the perpetual, but I think he can only do that if he keeps his rook along this g-file, and that would mean that he can't bring his rook over here to stop this pawn. So actually looking at it further, I just think it's a draw, because I think both people have to be able to perpetual check the other person, or they risk losing. I guess especially black, because white will promote sooner. So this is played, trying to trade the rooks. If he managed to trade one pair of rooks, and then trade this rook for that pawn, that is going to be a win for black with the 4 connected pawns against white's rook, especially with white's king so far out of the action. As rook d2 is played, it looks like he's getting set up for this perpetual. a3, yeah, let's check here. He's porting his rook now. His pawn's almost promoted, so we're just going to check continually along here, I guess. Yeah, okay, and no more moves, so draw agreed here. Okay, so that was the 10th round. I think it was kind of interesting opening. You kind of saw the good and bad points about this opening, mainly the bad, I'd say. Because you saw how this kind of slowed white down a lot, and he actually had to have some tactics going along early on, which prevented black from just completely taking up these stray pawns. It's kind of interesting that alter here was theory, but as it is, there's just nothing white could really do against this backwards pawn, even though it's a pawn advantage. And in the end, black just, I think both sides were happy with a draw. I think black more than white, because white could have just stayed passive and tried to hold on to this, but is unfortunately unable to make anything happen with the 8 pawn, so kind of led to that draw. A lot of rook endgames are draws, so it shouldn't be too surprising. Okay, so I think this is a 15-round tournament, so I think I've got 5 more videos to do. I said I'd finish this, and that is the